Dubro Suspicion Files.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are peering through the blast-resistant doors and the high-resolution surveillance systems of some of the world's most powerful people. We're investigating a phenomenon that's really moved from, the realm of sci-fi conspiracy into just verifiable fact. The rapid accumulation of these fortified, self-sufficient properties by ultra-high net worth individuals. It's what people are now calling the billionaire bunker boom.
And it's probably the most significant physical sign of the cognitive changes happening at the very top of the global elite. It represents this profound and kind of destabilizing paradox.
A paradox, how so?
Well, the very class of individuals who have, accelerated global volatility through all these massive technological and financial leaps, they're now dedicating just huge, disproportionate amounts of capital, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, to physically withdraw from the very system they helped create.
Right, so they're building escape routes.
Escape routes, insurance policies, basically they're hedging against a total systemic failure.
Exactly. And this isn't about building a comfy vacation home in Aspen or, the Hamptons. We're analyzing everything from detailed property records, sealed planning documents, interviews with architects in the survival industry. And, maybe most importantly, the specific philosophical texts that are circulating in places like Silicon Valley. Our goal is to really define this new architectural typology, the fortified eco-resort.
That typology is so key, because these aren't just bunkers in the old sense of the word. We think of these concrete basements for, short-term nuclear fallout.
Cold War shelter.
The Cold War shelter, exactly. These are hyper-complex, self-sufficient biospheres. They're engineered to sustain a high, often luxury standard of living for months, maybe even years, all during what they just call an event.
And the event is?
The total violent collapse of civilizational order as we know it.
So what's actually fueling this trend? Because the scale and the urgency, it suggests something way beyond simple real estate diversification. Our sources are pointing to a convergence of, three distinct, really powerful concepts that kind of define the underlying mindset of this group.
The first one is purely psychological.
Okay.
It's called sudden wealth syndrome, or SWS. It's a recognized psychological response to getting mass amounts of wealth really, really quickly. Think tech IPOs, venture capital windfalls.
Okay.
And it breeds this intense paranoia, deep isolation, and this feeling that every relationship you have is transactional or even hostile.
And then second, you have the intellectual framework for that paranoia, this neo-reactionary political blueprint that comes from really the foundational text of the movement,
right? The
sovereign individual.
And that book, that gives them the structural prediction for why the world is going to fail them. And then third, they layer on this kind of pseudo-moral justification. It's drawn from the utilitarian calculus that's been popularized by the effective altruism movement, specifically focusing on existential risk or X risk.
So that gives them a way to reframe their own survival as, a moral obligation.
A moral good even, yeah.
So our mission today is to unpack what these physical fortifications, from blast-resistant doors in Kauai to these hidden stealth compounds in New Zealand, what they truly represent. They seem to be a fundamental physical breach of the social contract, and maybe more importantly, a massive financial and intellectual bet against our collective future. We're looking at the architecture of Exodus.
Okay, let's unpack this and maybe start by analyzing this strategy of, geographical withdrawal. Why is the Hawaiian archipelago, it's 2,500 miles from the nearest continent. Why is it evolving from a tropical vacation spot into this strategic, heavily fortified asset for the American tech elite?
Well, Hawaii offers a few natural advantages that line up perfectly with their sort of multi-layered threat model. First is that massive saltwater buffer. That 2,500-mile moat is an immediate defense against mainland civil unrest or, an uncontrolled pandemic resource depletion.
And it's stable. It's politically stable, right, compared to a lot of other isolated islands.
Yeah.
For someone wealthy who's looking for a calculable, survivable location, Hawaii offers that isolation without the geopolitical unpredictability of some overseas tax haven.
And the undisputed case study in the sheer scale of this architecture of Exodus, has to be Mark Zuckerberg's Kulo Ranch on Kauai's North Shore.
Right.
The scope of this complex, it's around 1,400 acres, is genuinely staggering.
It's a phenomenal undertaking. The estimated cost, when you combine the land buys over the years with the construction itself,
right,
it's now over $270 million.
Wow.
Which makes it one of the most expensive private homes ever built. But the cost, I think, is less important than the intent. Unlike, a traditional luxury estate that's designed for openness, for views, for entertaining, this whole compound is engineered for closure.
For autarky.
Meaning total, secure self-sufficiency.
So let's talk about the surface structures. There are 2 primary mansions, and they total 57,000 square feet, which, as our sources point out, is comparable to the footprint of a professional football field. But that visibility, it almost seems intentional, like a visual distraction that's hiding the real operational capability.
That's a great way to put it. The real protection, the real capabilities, they lie beneath the surface. The survival core is completely subterranean. The planning documents we've seen show this extensive tunnel network connecting the 2 main mansions. And it all culminates in a dedicated 5,000 square foot underground shelter.
Just to give you a sense of scale, that shelter alone is larger than most multi-million-dollar homes in the U.S.
It is. It's a mansion underground.
And this is where it gets really interesting based on the specific engineering specs revealed in those planning documents. This is where you see the mindset really shift from luxury to like a full-on siege mentality.
Oh, absolutely. The specifications, they line up with high-level military-grade fortifications. Crucially, the facility features a concrete and steel blast-resistant door.
And that's the key tell.
That's the key. This level of hardening is just.
Yeah.
It's completely unnecessary for standard weather events, hurricanes, even a major earthquake. You don't need this.
So if it's not for the weather, what is the threat model they're planning for?
It strongly suggests they're expecting high-pressure shock waves, which is consistent with either, kinetic attacks like mortar rounds or big explosives, or the outer ring of a nuclear detonation shock wave. It signals a threat model of state-level aggression or a total violent civil collapse where the fortress has to survive that external pressure.
And they also included these sophisticated internal security and escape features that sound like something out of a spy movie.
Right. The plans detail these elaborate egress systems, escape hatches, and the inclusion of, get this, blind doors.
Blind doors.
Yeah, doors that blend seamlessly into the walls. They look like a bookcase or just a wood panel, like a secret passage.
And that's not for convenience.
No, this is for specific evasion, for lockdown protocols, for creating layers of defense if the compound is ever breached. It's engineering a way to hide inside your own home.
And the independence from the grid is total, right? It's all focused on resource sovereignty.
Independence is the ultimate goal here. You see it in the water infrastructure. There's a massive 55-foot diameter, 18-foot tall water tank and pump system. That whole setup ensures complete independence from the local public utility on Kauai.
So if there's a massive drought or the system fails, they're fine. They don't need anyone else on the island.
Not at all.
And the 1,400 acres themselves, they're basically weaponized for survival. The extensive cattle ranching and agriculture, it's all a secure, closed-loop caloric system. They're not just storing MREs, they're creating a sustainable long-term food supply.
It's a full ecosystem project. In the event of a total prolonged supply chain collapse, global ports close, planes stop flying, grocery stores are empty, they have a self-replenishing food source. This level of prep isn't about hedging against a recession. It's hedging against the complete failure of the entire post-World War II global trade structure.
But despite all this evidence of, siege engineering, Zuckerberg has publicly tried to minimize it, calling it just a little shelter, kind of like a basement.
The narrative control is fascinating, isn't it? Because it contrasts so sharply with those planning documents. The PR strategy seems designed to placate public anxiety and scrutiny. To admit you're building a $270 million fortress against a nuclear attack while the world is struggling with inflation, well, it's just poor optics.
So they frame it as a humble refuge from Hawaiian weather.
Which is just demonstrably false based on the blast specs.
Okay, moving from the physical architecture to the legal architecture. Securing a perimeter this size in Hawaii required more than just concrete and steel. It required a kind of legal aggression, specifically the weaponization of quiet title to remove local land claims.
This is such a critical and often overlooked part of the whole bunker boom, the aggressive use of the legal system to consolidate territory. Because securing a single contiguous perimeter in Hawaii is historically really, really difficult. And that's because of the Kuleana Act of 1850. We have to understand this historical conflict.
Okay, so what exactly did the Kuleana Act do?
So after European contact, the Hawaiian monarchy granted these small parcels of land called Kuleana lands to indigenous tenant families, basically so they could subsist. But crucially, a lot of these parcels were passed down informally through generations without clear, updated title deeds. So over 170 years, these parcels became incredibly fractionated. You might have hundreds of heirs who collectively own like 1 square meter.
So if you're a billionaire trying to build an isolated, secure fortress, these little locally owned parcels scattered all over your land, they're not just a nuisance, they're a massive security vulnerability. They create holes in your isolation bubble.
A huge vulnerability, absolutely. They represent potential public access points or, squatting concerns that just completely compromise the total isolation objective. So to close these gaps, Zuckerberg's entities used quiet title lawsuits.
Yeah.
And while these are, legitimate legal tools meant to establish clear ownership, they were pretty much weaponized here.
How does that mechanism work to dispossess the local families?
Well, Zuckerberg's legal team identified hundreds of partial heirs to these 𝐏𝐿iana lands. Many of them didn't even know they had a claim. They filed a suit to force a resolution, and because the parcels were so small, they couldn't be physically divided among hundreds of people. So the court orders a partition sale.
Which means the land is just auctioned off, and the billionaire, who has unlimited capital, inevitably wins.
Precisely. The powerful capital consolidates the land, and in doing so, effectively extinguishes these ancestral and indigenous rights. It's the legal sanitization of territory. And it triggered a massive backlash from native Hawaiian groups who saw it as the continuation of colonial dispossession.
Just using a sophisticated legal tool instead of physical force.
Exactly. It shows the bunker boom isn't just about construction. It's about the active legal displacement of existing communities for the new owner's security.
Now let's contrast that model of fortress within a community with the approach of Larry Ellison, the Oracle co-founder. Ellison chose what you could call the feudal island model on the island of Lanai.
Ellison's strategy is completely different. It's a play for total territorial control. In 2012, he bought 98% of the entire island of Lanai for $300 million. This is the company island model. I mean, it's a concept that hasn't really existed at this scale in modern America since like the early 20th century.
The owner is the de facto sovereign ruler.
He is.
So what does that level of control actually mean for the 3,000 residents who live there?
It means total dependence. Ellison controls the vast majority of all critical infrastructure. He owns the water company, the main electric utility, the main grocery stores, most of the housing. Critics have compared this hyper-curated, controlled environment to playing a high-stakes, real-life game of The Sims.
And that level of resource monopolization makes the residents incredibly vulnerable, even in a non-collapse scenario.
Man, we've seen those tensions surface. Just last year, in 2023, the Ellison-owned water utility proposed these significant rate increases, citing infrastructure costs. It just shows the immediate, severe vulnerability of the residents when one private actor controls the essential commodities they need to survive.
Access control is another point of friction, right?
Disputes come up over occasional gate closures at Hulpo Beach Park, which locals see as a private enclosure of what should be common land.
So in a collapse scenario, Lanai gives Ellison a clearly defined territory with the ultimate protection, a saltwater moat. But unlike Zuckerberg's secret bunker, this model seems to carry a unique, immediate risk.
The risk is internal. While Ellison has engineered sovereignty, he also has 3,000 potentially restive dependents who rely on his system for their survival. If the global system collapses, the social contract on Lanai, which is completely privatized, becomes extremely fragile. This model carries a severe localized risk of internal revolt. A massive island fortress needs loyalty to survive a siege, not just economic obedience.
That tension really sets the stage for the global elite's favorite insurance policy, which is New Zealand. If Hawaii is the American keep, then New Zealand or Aotearoa is the premier choice for the truly global insurance plan.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, New Zealand is not just chosen because it's scenic. It's the result of a highly specific, cold, hard survivability calculation. It's based on objective metrics for surviving the event. It's the elite's civilizational backup drive.
So what makes it score the highest in that geopolitical survival calculus?
The metrics are really clear. First, you have kinetic safety. It is just geographically far removed from the likely theaters of nuclear war or large-scale conventional war, which are mostly in the northern hemisphere. Second, epidemiological safety. As an isolated island nation with really strict biosecurity laws, it can effectively and rapidly shut its borders.
As we saw during COVID-19.
Famously, yes, they can control pandemics or engineered biological agents.
And the third factor is just pure, brute resource density, which guarantees caloric independence.
Exactly. New Zealand produces enough food, mostly dairy and meat, to feed an estimated 40 million people. But it only have a population of 5 million. So that 8-to-1 food surplus ensures immense caloric abundance, immense survivability, even if global trade just stops for a decade.
Resource-rich and population-sparse.
The ideal retreat.
The central figure in this whole New Zealand prepping narrative is Peter Thiel. And his citizenship acquisition is just a textbook example of how the ultra-wealthy can bypass national border controls to secure their asset.
The Thiel case is hugely controversial, and it perfectly illustrates that customer jurisdiction philosophy. He was granted New Zealand citizenship in 2011, despite only spending 12 days in the country his whole life.
And the standard requirement is?
1,350 days, so it's a massive deviation. The whole transaction was expedited, finalized during a private ceremony in Santa Monica, California, not even on New Zealand soil.
And the justification given by government officials was that his exceptional entrepreneurial skills would benefit the nation, backed by a $1 million donation to the Christchurch Earthquake Relief Fund.
It was effectively citizenship by investment, just packaged as a national benefit. The strategic value here is undeniable. Citizenship allowed him to bypass their overseas investment office, which heavily restricts foreign, non-resident ownership of sensitive land.
Right.
So this maneuver enabled his purchase of that 477-acre former sheep station near Lake Wanaka.
And Thiel's own comments really underline the philosophical motivation. He said he found no other country that aligns more with my view of the future, which suggests a secure libertarian exit from what he perceives as Western democratic chaos. Let's look at the architectural philosophy of his Wanaka compound.
Thiel's proposed lodge, it was designed by 𝐏𝐃𝐂𝐀𝐒𝐓 and Associates, and it was meant to embody what's called stealth architecture. It wasn't designed to be flashy. It was designed to be invisible.
Okay.
The plans called for this massive linear structure, 330 meters long, to be aggressively embedded into the hillside. It had an owner's pod, a meditation space, and accommodation for 24 people.
So a facility the length of a skyscraper laid on its side, built to house an entire survival platoon, and designed to be unseen.
That camouflage is the primary security feature. It used green roofs, extensive earthworks, to make the structure almost invisible from public roads and the lake. This prioritizes camouflage against aerial surveillance and, crucially, against public resentment.
If collapse comes, you don't want the local population knowing where all the resources are hidden.
You absolutely do not.
The irony here, though, is that despite Thiel's immense power, local governance actually achieved a rare victory in this case.
But they did. In 2022, the Queenstown Lakes District Council rejected the building consent application. They specifically cited the negative impact on the region's outstanding natural landscape. It was a rare pushback, showing that even the world's most powerful technologists can't always bypass local environmental resistance.
Though the intent to build this massive self-sufficient refuge was clearly established.
The intent was there.
And the survival planning, it's not just a solo pursuit. The interconnectedness of the Silicon Valley prepping community is revealed by what our sources are calling the Sam Altman Pact.
The network is a really crucial element. The OpenAI CEO, Sam Altman, he openly admitted to having this collaborative buddy system with Peter Thiel. The plan was, if a systemic collapse happened, say an AI breakout or a synthetic virus that threatened human existence, they would fly a private jet to Thiel's New Zealand estate or to just sit out the catastrophe.
That really highlights that their survival planning is a distributed network of safe houses. They're sharing resources, or at a minimum, coordinating escape routes. But Altman's personal preparation reveals an even more granular, specific threat model.
His stockpiled supplies are a clear indicator of the specific layered threats that the rationalist mind models. He admitted to hoarding potassium iodide, which is a specific countermeasure to protect the thyroid gland from radiation poisoning.
So a clear, acknowledged fear of nuclear escalation.
No question.
And he also has military-grade protection for biological or chemical threats.
Correct. He stockpiles Israeli Defense Force gas masks. That suggests preparation against chemical or biological agents, probably an engineered pandemic or biowarfare. And of course, gold. The classic non-fiat hedge against a total currency collapse.
So this isn't just generalized anxiety.
No, it's scenario planning against nuclear, biological, and financial breakdown all at the same time.
And he has a domestic fallback location in case a trans-Pacific flight is impossible.
Yes. His Big Sur property on the California coast serves as a domestic, heavily fortified fallback. This just reflects the deep level of scenario modeling they're doing. They aren't just thinking of one collapse. They're modeling concurrent, potentially mutually exclusive catastrophic events. It's a complexity that comes directly from their analytical training.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting from an engineering perspective. The market for this survival infrastructure is no longer a DIY thing with shovels and canned beans. It's a full-fledged, high-end industry offering turnkey solutions that, rival five-star hotels in comfort and nuclear submarines in durability.
The demand is translating into this specialized high-margin construction sector.
Yeah.
And it's fueled by the narrative of polycrisis. This idea that we're seeing the simultaneous convergence of multiple large-scale risks: climate change, geopolitical instability like the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, and domestic social fragmentation in the West.
And for the wealthy, the solution is just to buy their way out of the risk pool.
Pretty much.
And the market growth figures really bear this out. Companies like Rising S Company, Vivos, Atlas Survival Shelters, they're reporting massive spikes in inquiries. Vivos, which specializes in community bunkers, noted a staggering 2,000% year-over-year increase in inquiries during the early pandemic and after the start of the Ukraine war.
And the product offerings, they cater directly to the ultra-wealthy who demand that their survival contingency maintains their high standard of living. And that drives the creation of these luxury models that just defy the Spartan imagery of old Cold War bunkers.
Let's look at some of these high-end facilities. Rising S.Co.'s The Aristocrat model. It's priced near $10 million. And it sounds more like an underground country club.
It does. For that price, you get a facility that can house over 50 people. It has a bowling alley, a sauna, a massive swimming pool, a fully equipped gym, a multi-story hydroponic greenhouse, a garage, and an indoor gun range. The psychological element here is critical. They're preparing not just for survival, but for prolonged comfort and the maintenance of a high-status lifestyle, even underground.
And the community models often utilize abandoned military infrastructure, which provides that inherent hardening.
Take Vivos Europa 1. It's built deep inside a former Soviet-era mountain munitions storage facility in Germany. It's designed for about 34 families. And it has luxury amenities like swimming pools, custom wine cellars, a helipad for discreet arrivals, and even its own train depot for access.
The goal is to create a self-contained underground city.
It is.
And for those looking for a, let's say, base-level community option, Vivos X Point in South Dakota repurposed a massive former munitions depot into 575 individual bunkers. The sheer scale shows this is a recognized industrial sector, segmented from luxury all the way down to, relative affordability for millionaires, if not billionaires.
But whether it's a single fortified ranch or a community model, the core sophistication is always in the life support systems. They have to be engineered to operate for years without any external input. We need to focus on what you could call the lungs of the bunker.
Which means the nuclear, biological, chemical filtration, the NBC system.
Precisely. Swiss-made NBC filtration systems are standard at this price point. These are not simple air filters. They're complex, multi-stage units designed to scrub the air of fallout particles, chemical weapons residue, airborne pathogens, and crucially, these systems maintain positive pressure inside the bunker.
Why is positive pressure so essential for survival?
Well, in a contaminated external environment, if your internal pressure is lower than the outside, toxic air is going to naturally seep in through any cracks or openings. Positive pressure means the internal air pressure is always slightly higher than the external. So when an airlock opens, clean air flows out,
preventing the bad air from getting in.
It prevents the ingress of contaminated air or biowarfare agents. It's the difference between safety and catastrophic exposure.
Another essential mechanism that I think few people consider is the blast valve, which deals with the massive physical force of an external explosion.
Blast valves are highly sophisticated, critical safety mechanisms. They're designed to detect the milliseconds fast pressure wave of an explosion, a nearby bomb, a kinetic strike, and automatically slam the air intake shut. This prevents the catastrophic overpressurization of the bunker interior.
And if the valves fail, the shockwave basically enters the bunker and acts like a massive hammer.
That's right. That sudden, immense pressure would instantly rupture the eardrums, sinuses, and lungs of everyone inside. It would kill them not with radiation or fire, but with pure kinetic force. The need for this kind of engineering reflects the severity of the perceived threat. They are preparing for war zones above ground.
And since these facilities rely entirely on complex control systems, air scrubbing, pumps, lights, they have to address the threat of an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP.
EMP fueling is mandatory for long-term viability. An electromagnetic pulse from either a high-altitude nuke or a massive solar flare can instantly fry all unshielded electronics.
And your life support systems are dead.
Completely dead. So the structures are built as complete Faraday cages or equipped with EMP-hardened electrical grids to protect the sophisticated computers that run their survival.
This link between the threat model and the engineering is so crucial. I mean, requiring EMP hardening and blast resistance, it fully validates the extreme pessimism of the philosophical texts they follow. They believe total state failure is coming, and they're engineering against a military-style response.
Absolutely. The need for EMP protection confirms their fear that the collapse will be military or state-driven, not just, a gradual economic decline.
Finally, the goal of autarky means sustainable food production has moved light years beyond just storing cans.
Oh, yeah. Luxury bunkers incorporate these advanced integrated agriculture systems. We're talking elaborate, often multi-tiered hydroponic and aquaponic gardens. For instance, the ABBoo Studios DDX concept includes a massive 1,200 square foot subterranean greenhouse that uses specialized violet LED grow lights to produce fresh biomass. This ensures nutritional longevity, but also psychological well-being. Moving past the boredom and nutritional deficiencies of eating rations for years.
That technical sophistication is just staggering, but it's really only half the story. The investment only makes sense if you buy into the underlying ideology.
And that raises the important question we mentioned earlier. Why are they building these, and why are they so convinced of a global collapse? The bunker boom is the ultimate physical expression of what we're calling the mindset. This belief that capital and technology can transcend the human condition and separate the elite from our collective human fate.
And the blueprint for this whole philosophy of exit is that foundational text, The Sovereign Individual, Mastering the Transition to the Information Age. It was published back in '97, and Peter Thiel and many others have cited it as a major influence.
The core thesis of The Sovereign Individual is absolutely dominant in Silicon Valley. It argues that the information age, driven by cryptography and digital tech, will inevitably render the geographically defined nation-state obsolete.
Why?
Because technology makes capital impossible to track, to tax, or to control.
So, if the government can no longer tax wealth, the state starves and collapses.
Precisely. The state loses its fundamental revenue base, and in Luke's prediction, it devolves into this predatory, violent competition for scarce resources. The book predicts the rise of microstates and private security companies replacing public governance.
And this leads to the emergence of a new elite, the cognitive elite.
They call them sovereign individuals. These people will cease to be fixed citizens of nations and will instead become customers of jurisdictions. They'll digitally move their assets and physically move their bodies to wherever offers the best protection and the lowest tax rates.
So the logical conclusion of this philosophy is that the democratic state is destined to fail, making the private fortress not paranoia, but logical preparation.
It becomes a necessary step for physical survival, against what the book warns will be the return of the Luddites, the disenfranchised masses, who will violently lash out against the technological elite who abandoned them. The bunker, therefore, is the physical, final secession from society and the last desperate stand of pure libertarian freedom.
That's the political blueprint. Now let's look at the moral justification, which comes from the effective altruism movement. Specifically, its focus on long-termism and existential risk, or X-risk.
Long-termism is highly rationalist and utilitarian. It tries to distinguish between global catastrophic risks, which damage civilization like a massive plague or a world war, and existential risks, X-risk. And X-risks permanently destroy humanity's potential for the future. Total extinction or irreversible technological stagnation.
And the moral calculus they derive from this is extreme because it quantifies the value of the future.
It's staggering. Long-termists argue that since the potential number of future humans is astronomically high, they often cite, trillions of future beings inhabiting the galaxy. The highest moral priority today is just ensuring the survival of the species.
To protect that astronomical future potential.
Right. Our present challenges pale in comparison to the risk of total extinction.
So their logic flips the script entirely. If a bunker preserves the seed corn of civilization, the technologists, the engineers, the capital, it's not an act of selfishness.
It is reframed as a crucial moral duty. They see themselves as maintaining the civilizational backup drive. This aligns perfectly with Elon Musk's rationale for colonizing Mars. Making humanity multiplanetary is the ultimate systemic hedge against Earth's inevitable destruction.
They're preserving human potential, and they believe they are the indispensable remnants needed to restart civilization.
They do.
But surely this extreme calculus alienates the very society they claim to be saving. I mean, if they're investing all their resources in preparing for an exit, they are implicitly abandoning the immediate present issues of the world.
That is the paradox that critics highlight. They justify the expenditure on personal survival by appealing to the moral imperative of future generations, but they're neglecting the current social contract. The ideology creates this intellectual barrier that allows them to prioritize their own security over collective action that might prevent the very collapse they fear.
Beyond the philosophy, let's return to the psychological drivers that make a rational person choose this path. You mentioned sudden wealth syndrome, SWS, earlier.
SWS is so critical. When wealth is acquired so rapidly and in such immense volume, it creates this sense of profound instability and vulnerability. The condition is characterized by this pervasive paranoia, the assumption that all external relationships are transactional, that every public interaction is a threat, that you are constantly a target.
And that naturally leads to extreme isolation.
It does. We call it a gated community of the mind.
And the physical solidity of a concrete fortress provides a tangible solution to this abstract psychological fear.
Absolutely. So much of these tech billionaires' wealth is tied up in abstract digital assets, volatile stock valuations, lines of code. For a mind struggling with SWS, the physical solidity of a concrete, steel-reinforced subterranean bunker offers a tangible, immutable sense of permanence and safety. It's safety against a subconscious fear of a financial or social correction, the loss of their precarious wealth. The Earth itself becomes a psychological defense layer.
There's also the element of what's been called cyberchondria, which is prevalent among the hyper-analytical tech elite.
This is a perfect psychological corollary. Sam Altman's mother famously noted his tendency to Google headaches until he feared lymphoma. This is emblematic of a kind of rationalist anxiety where they live in this information-rich environment and they become hyper-aware of every low-probability, high-impact threat AI misalignment, supervolcanoes, engineered pandemics, and their analytical dominance compels them to try and solve it.
They attempt to solve survival in the same way they debug code. They're treating existential vulnerability as a technical flaw.
That's the entire engineering approach.
Sure.
The bunker is viewed as a technical patch for the vulnerabilities of biological existence. Their worldview, driven by data and analytical problem-solving, leads them to treat existential threats not as philosophical challenges requiring social solutions, but as technical problems that can be solved with enough capital and enough engineering prowess.
Okay, we've established the technical sophistication and the philosophical grounding, but we need to pivot now to the single fatal flaw in this entire high-tech, high-cost strategy.
Right. What's fascinating here is that despite all this advanced technology and all this philosophical justification, the fatal flaw in the entire strategy remains the most unpredictable variable, the human element. This is what the media theorist Douglas Rushkoff famously dubbed the security paradox.
And Rushkoff recounts a meeting where Billionaire's primary concern was not the specs of the blast doors or the effectiveness of the NBC filtration. It was the loyalty of the people they would bring inside with them.
The dilemma is profound and existential. In a post-apocalyptic scenario where money has lost its value, the rule of law has vanished, and the only currency is food, water, and security. What prevents the hired security staff, the former Navy SEALs and highly trained mercenaries, from simply taking over the facility and claiming the vast resources for themselves?
It's the moment of truth for the entire sovereign individual thesis. If they can't buy loyalty, the system fails.
It absolutely fails. And their proposed solutions, which they brainstormed in this meeting, they reveal a truly dystopian mindset and a complete severance from the social contract. They demonstrate a fear of relying on humanity itself.
Tell us about some of those dystopian solutions.
They range from the absurd to the terrifying. One hedge fund manager seriously suggested using disciplinary collars, like shot collars, on the guards to enforce discipline in a zero-sum environment. Others talked about replacing human guards entirely with robotic sentries and automated systems, just to eliminate the loyalty variable.
That's a huge jump from libertarian freedom and hypercapitalism to pure coercive feudal control. The irony is staggering. They're engineering a miniature totalitarian state of two inside the bunker.
The irony is the system collapsing into the most ancient form of governance, despotism and coerced loyalty. But maybe the most telling and structurally feasible solution they discussed was the return to a true feudal model, or what we might call the warlord model.
The idea of binding the guards to the facility through their families.
Precisely. This involves only hiring security personnel who have families, and then housing those families inside the bunker with them. This creates this powerful structure of mutually assured survival. The guard's self-interest is inextricably tied to protecting the billionaire and the facility.
Because if the facility fails,
Or the billionaire is overthrown, the guard's own dependents, their children and spouses, also perish. It's a sophisticated system of hostage-taking disguised as guaranteed protection.
this anxiety proves they are fully aware of the fragility of the social contract. Yet their proposed solutions all rely on coercion and control. It shows they've completely given up on the idea of community building.
They're trying to technically solve a fundamentally social and emotional problem trust with surveillance and force. This failure to trust or invest in the community outside the blast door is the ultimate self-sabotage of the bunker mindset.
Before we conclude, we should also look at how these massive isolated fortresses are funded and secured, because it often involves using specific financial mechanics to create a tax-advantaged moat around the property.
This is where we see their wealth being leveraged in a surprisingly effective way. The use of conservation easements. This is a key financial tool used to protect assets, reduce tax liability, and simultaneously secure vast tracts of perimeter land.
Can you explain how that mechanism actually works to benefit the bunker builder?
The mechanism is straightforward and totally legal. The landowner, the billionaire, voluntarily restricts the development rights on a portion of their newly acquired land. So they're saying they can't build houses or commercial properties there, ostensibly for environmental preservation. In the U.S., this donation of future development rights allows for a significant federal tax deduction. It effectively subsidizes the cost of the land acquisition.
So if I'm a billionaire building a fortress, I buy 1,000 acres, put the outer 800 acres into a conservation easement, and the government pays me, through tax breaks, to keep my crucial buffer zone empty and free from potential neighbors.
That is the strategic utility. It legally prevents anyone else from building nearby, which preserves the buffer zone, while the government, through the tax code, is effectively paying the owner to maintain that isolation mode. Zuckerberg's Kauai estate, with its emphasis on ranching and preservation status, benefits greatly from this. It's a government-subsidized, tax-advantaged path to radical isolation.
So what does this all mean? We've seen the architectural, the legal, the psychological, and the philosophical lengths the ultra-wealthy are going to in order to prepare for collapse. From the military-grade hardening of Kauai and the legal aggression of quiet title actions to the stealth architecture of Wanaka, the strategy is comprehensive.
Yeah, we've established that these preparations are technically sophisticated. NBC filtration, EMP shielding, their legally aggressive citizenship by investment, tax-advantaged land consolidation, and they are philosophically consistent. They're all rooted in this belief that the state will collapse and the cognitive elite must exit.
But the chilling truth is the inherent self-fulfilling prophecy of their actions.
By withdrawing their faith, their immense capital, and their leadership into these underground vaults, the ultra-wealthy, the very people with the greatest power to shape global systems, they may be accelerating the very societal breakdown they fear. They're not merely hedging against the collective future, they are abandoning it. And in doing so, they're reducing the resources and the collective will needed to prevent that collapse.
They're betting hundreds of millions of dollars against the human capacity for resilience.
And that takes us right back to the security paradox. The mindset fails to understand that survival, particularly long-term survival in a post-catastrophe world, is fundamentally a social function, not a technological one. They can engineer blast-resistant doors and stockpile gold and gas masks, but they cannot engineer trust, loyalty, or community.
The bunker is less a fortress built to survive the future and more a monument built to memorialize their present anxiety.
A monument to the profound anxiety of the technological winners who, deep down, suspect they may have fundamentally broken the game. They bought isolation at the cost of connection. And a bunker is ultimately a lonely, profoundly limited place to watch the end of the world. The greatest risk they face might not be the external fallout, but the internal collapse of the social units they tried so desperately to control.
That is an incredibly provocative note to end on. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure.
And for you, the listener, the provocative thought we leave you with. If the world's most rational minds are spending billions to plan for the worst-case scenario, what does that say about the future they are not willing to invest in? And if survival is indeed a social function, not a technological one, what are you investing in right now that you might need when the blast doors finally seal? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.